You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
Going to start with rugby today. We bring in New Zealand Rugby CEO Mark Robinson. Thanks for your time as always, Mark, on Weekend Sport. You're heading north later on today for meetings over the week ahead on the shape of the game of rugby. So specifically, what are those meetings about?
Yeah, we're going up for a week of meetings. They're quite wide-ranging in nature, but I guess the core focus is around the shape of the game, which essentially zeroes in on the nature of the product on field and essentially how we can work together as a global game to make the game more attractive, provide greater entertainment value, and as we said earlier in the week after the board meetings we had in Wellington, greater tempo in the game, less intervention, and overall something that as a sport connects better to the fans.
How challenging and important a time is this for the game of rugby as a product for the fans?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. As I said earlier in the week, we see these as probably the most critical meetings on a global stage for a long time, and it's critically important that everyone comes into the forums, we believe, with a really progressive, proactive sort of mindset around trying to take the game forward. We've got to be careful. We're still seeing amazing contests in the game. I mean, I thought last night as an opening game, we'll probably chat about it soon, but for an opening game for Super Rugby Pacific, the game in Hamilton was absolutely top draw and still shows that the sport can be an incredible spectacle. But we're also seeing times, most notably out of the World Cup and some aspects of Six Nations, we're seeing where, it's frustrating for fans and I think for players and coaches and administrators as well. So that's why we see an ideal time to come together. Normally the law cycle runs in 4-year cycles after World Cup. We're hoping that we can speed that process up in terms of changing laws and trialling different things and see a real opportunity to refresh the game for the positive.
Is everybody on board with this, Mark? You talk and say, here's what we would like to see. Is everybody on board with this globally?
Well, I think if you come back to first principles about how do you grow the game and fulfill the aspiration of being a truly global sport, then the sport's got to be, highly attractive to fans. And all the research we're seeing tells us that fans want greater tempo, greater spectacles, greater movement, less intervention, less time around total match duration and all those sorts of things. So if we're listening, to the fans and we really want to grow the sport, see it played and understood in more global markets and realise the value that comes from that by virtue of, commercial value, then I think everyone is starting to see that we've got to move reasonably quickly in this space. So, my observations and conversations with fellow colleagues around the world, be it Six Nations or SANZAR or some of the emerging nations, would certainly say that people are recognising that.
The biggest complaint we get from rugby fans on this show, and I'm sure this will come as no surprise to you, is TMO interference. Surely there needs to be less of that, Mark.
Well, as I say, we believe we've taken a real leadership role as it relates to New Zealand Rugby and Rugby Australia over the last couple of years with our domestic competitions. If we refer back to last night, the opening game of the competition, I think there was one. I think Nick did a great job officiating that game and used it very quickly and effectively around a try or no try situation. From memory, there were no others, and the match duration of the game was well under 2 hours, I think. So, we know we can achieve that. We just need to drive greater alignment across the global game and somehow balance, some of the reasons for considering intervention of TMO have been aligned to player safety and other aspects of accuracy in the game. Well, we don't want to lose sight of player safety. We're certainly not saying that, but at the same time, we need to acknowledge that the fans want to see a greater spectacle and more movement in the game. So it is a balancing act, and we think it can be done. We're showing that here domestically and across in Australia, and now it's just a case of working through with more leading unions to bring that through more consistently on the global stage.
Let's talk about last night. I agree, terrific contest. Just 16,000 there for a Super Rugby grand final rematch. Up the road there were 30,000 at the cricket. That's a concern, isn't it?
Oh, look, I think they're different. The different settings, aren't they? We are at the early start of a season. We've always seen our crowds grow as people get more into the traditional season for rugby. It's a different setting in terms of the international versus club sort of setting as well. So I mean, I didn't talk to the Chiefs guys about the crowd. I was down in Hamilton. They had a great night. The atmosphere in the stadium was fantastic. So I think they'll be looking to build on that over time. It's great that, I guess, from their perspective, that the Chiefs won. And overall, I think we all agree that the spectacle was fantastic. Fans will draw confidence from the fact that it was a great night, great vibe in the stadium, and hopefully we can build on it.
Why, though, do you think the casual sports fan is more interested in a game of T20 cricket than they are in a Super Rugby grand final rematch?
Well, like I say before, Piney, the context you're sharing here is very different. I mean, if we were to take an international lens to this, obviously, we've seen an incredible connection to international sport through rugby in this country in very recent years. So, I'm not sure you're comparing like for like, but regardless, we still saw, people for this time of the year come out, make a lot of noise, have a great time, and really get in behind the team. We saw, if we only go back to last year, we saw the Chiefs have, I think, record attendance as it relates across a whole season for the 25-odd years of their history. So we certainly know that Chiefs fans will come out in force through the season. And I'm sure the Chiefs are working really hard on that and understanding their market and doing all the work around marketing and promotion that they possibly can.
Do you think there is a segment of the New Zealand rugby public, though, Mark, that is a bit disillusioned with the game? And the second part of that question is, how do you get them back?
No, I don't think that's the case at all, Piney. I think that, as I referred to earlier, some of the clinical moments we've seen in the game in recent times, as you look at like Super Rugby last year, some of the clubs had amazing attendances. The finals are very well attended. We've seen Rugby World Cup in 2022 with record in stadia and broadcast numbers for the women's game. And we've seen a World Cup recently with, again, record broadcast numbers. We saw a massive lift in Super Rugby Pacific last year as it related to broadcast and streaming. So, no, I don't agree, with your view at all there. I think there's great connection to the game. We see more participation year on year last year, and numbers getting back, playing the game at a community level, getting closer to pre-COVID levels. So, look, there's great connection to the game, and we're certainly not saying we're the finished article and we've got work to do. There's always, I think, for all sports, and especially traditional sports, there's work to do in that space, but we're seeing really heartening signs across all levels of the game.
We had Super Rugby Pacific Chair Kevin Malloy on the show a couple of weeks ago. He said in talking about broadcast that they'd take less broadcast money for Super Rugby if it meant more free-to-air content. And we know cricket has benefited, albeit inadvertently, from a huge free-to-air component. Would you consider the same for All Blacks rugby?
Oh, look, it's too early to speculate, really, Piney. It's certainly a consideration that I know, you see the movements from Sky around the way about approaching Super Rugby Pacific this year and the moves they're making there around free-to-air, and we're working in partnership with them there. So that's something that needs to be worked through the course of this year as we look to the next right cycle. But we certainly know connecting with more fans on a free-to-air platform has obvious benefits, and they'll obviously be part of those conversations when the time's right.
And as far as NZR Plus is concerned, are you still continuing to examine whether you stream some content on that platform?
Yeah, we've seen. I'm sure some of the fans out there have seen work done recently with pre-season in Super Rugby Pacific, where we trialled that on NZR Plus. It went really well from all accounts with the engagement, and that'll be one initiative that we look to work on again in consultation with Sky as we do that to build out different options there and try things. I mean, this is definitely a discovery phase as it relates to all of this work, Piney. There's, we're trying lots of different things as it relates to the way the game is produced and streamed and broadcast, as well as the things we're doing on the field, as I talked to about the law reform earlier on the interview. So lots of really positive and heartening things as it relates to trying to adapt to recognise how critical the fan is and the player for that matter.
Does it feel at the moment as though that you there really are no bad ideas? Well, that's probably the wrong way of asking it, but like everything's on the table at the moment as you search for ways to continue to engage fans and to bring others back to the game or to attract discretionary eyeballs. Does it feel, in terms of the rules of broadcast, all that sort of thing, in-game experience, that nothing is off the table as far as the discussion is concerned?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people always, use language like there's no such idea as a bad idea in these times of change, do they? And we're certainly very open-minded as it relates to how we can set the game up and deliver it at all levels, be that at community level, high-performance level, and into the professional game for the fans. So, I think there's a lot to like about a lot of things about our game. That's one thing I'd say, Piney. We've got a huge amount of strength in our brands, huge connection in the game right throughout the country. There's lots of great things about the game, but we're always looking to evolve. And in some areas that might mean a slight tweak to things we're doing, and in some areas that might mean a more fundamental change. But to the point of your question, yes, I think we remain very open-minded. I think we've shown that in recent years.
And just on the Super Rugby use of HIA or smart mouthguards, saw Anton Leonard-Brown come off last night. He seemed completely astonished that he had to go off late in the game. I know you've mentioned a few times, and we always chat about player safety. Are these mouthguards, have they been rigorously tested? Is there still some work to be done on them?
Absolutely, the work's been done on them, but that'll continue to evolve. Essentially the mouthguards did their job last night, and as we work through anything new, there's always going to be things that we look at. But in terms of the testing, World Rugby has set the thresholds here, so if 85% of the people experiencing those forces occur, then they will have suffered a concussion. So we know that from the work that they've done, that they're well tested. That won't mean that there'll be constant review of how they're working, because they're only coming into force on the 1st of January. But certainly, we've been unapologetic around the importance of player safety in our game. We believe this is a positive step forward for the game, and we'll continue to monitor the player feedback and the feedback of those people that are behind the technology with the mouthguards.
Just to finish then, just to circle back to where you're headed today for these meetings over the next week or so, are you confident that your voice will be heard, that rugby will undergo some changes that will help to re-engage fans and that, that fans will be positive about?
Look, yeah, we go up there. It's not about individual voices, is it? I mean, we've worked really hard with SANZAAR here. And believe there's really good alignment with SANZAAR. We know that there's some really good feedback coming out of the Six Nations as to how they're approaching these meetings. We know that World Rugby want to set up great forums in terms of facilitating the work that's going to go on. So it's definitely a collective approach. There's no one voice or entity here that can do this on their own. We need to come together as a global game and really work hard to continue to take the game forward. All
right. Well, wish you all the best with that, Mark. Thanks for taking some time with us. And yeah, all I can say is, wish you all the best in trying to reshape the game. That's Mark Robinson, CEO of New Zealand Rugby. Very keen for your reaction to anything you heard there. 0800 80 10 80. Couple of points for me. Rugby is absolutely, and this isn't rocket science. Rugby's in a battle for eyeballs. By the sounds of things, the game's power brokers are aware of that and keen to do something about it. That's why they're having these meetings. The proof will be in the pudding, though, won't it? Well and truly. People will vote with their feet and with their eyes. Last night, we had a T20 international between New Zealand and Australia. At the same time, a Super Rugby opener, a repeat of last year's final between two of the best teams in the comp, if not the two best teams. Which of them held your focus? Look, I watched both, or tried to, with two screens. I thought the rugby was a terrific contest. What a game. The Crusaders showed that any suggestion of their impending demise have been severely overblown. To come back from 27-10 down, to actually lead at one stage was pretty impressive before the Chiefs got their noses in front and stayed there. It was certainly the rugby a better contest than the cricket, wasn't it? A 4-point margin compared to a 72-run thumping in a game of T20 cricket. Keen, though, to hear which one grabbed you and why, because it felt to me, just the social media I was looking at, the messages I was getting from friends who were watching one or the other, is that the cricket captured people's imagination more. If they had the choice to watch one or the other, I want to say around 80% chose the cricket. I'm keen to hear from you what grabbed you. And smart mouthguards. Just on these, they've been mandatory or made mandatory by World Rugby at the elite level. In simple terms, players wear these mouthguards and they register a high-impact collision over a predetermined threshold. And when there's a collision over that threshold, an alert goes to an app held by the independent matchday doctor to let them know that a player needs to come off for an HIA. Now, Anton Leonard-Brown, as I say last night, he looked completely confused when he looked over and they said, Anton, you've got to come off. I know both teams are concerned about potential teething problems. They, I think in some ways, believe this has been rushed a little bit. And the fact that they've led to some players even struggling to breathe because they're a bit chunky. Scotland hooker George Turner became the first player forced off in a Six Nations match the other week. Last night, Anton Leonard-Brown. Just want to play you quickly the comments of Scott Barrett afterwards.
Honestly, I think it's probably a step too far from a player when you're getting dragged and you're looking around what actually happened. I think it's, personally, I think, obviously, we want player welfare and that's paramount, but I think if you're influencing the game when key players are going off and they don't know what for, I think that can be frustrating for a player. So I think, there needs to be a happy medium somewhere within it.
Look, we all get it. We all understand. That was Scott Barrett. We all understand the need for player safety, but clearly there is a bit of work to be done here. Keen to hear your view on that. Just before we go to the lines, of course it was the cricket, says this one. It was an international in summer. We're more interested in the cricket at the moment, says this one, because it's February. I'm ready for rugby. Rugby's been a February sport for years now. Yes, it still feels like summer because there's cricket on, but rugby has started in February for several years now. Several years. Anyway.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.